hope everybody has got some coffee because I know I do. I encourage you to drink it. I encourage you to have a snack. If you're like me, you love a carb. And so whatever it takes to make it enjoyable, you go for it. You're going to see me drink coffee on the screen, which is my community service to everybody here. So like I mentioned just a second ago, with the past couple of years of seemingly endless incidents and increasing attacks that happened for everybody really in the past couple of years, it makes sense to talk about how we strengthen our defenses with our security operations centers. Depending on what research you look at, we see a 50% increase. We see in attacks, we see specific attacks for phishing, targeting people, targeting structures, infrastructure. We see ransomware payments, all of these things. So how do we harden the ability to respond? How do we harden the ability to strengthen the defenses of operations and really focus on why things seem to be not working there really well in the space? And it's been a struggle for years. So that's what we're going to talk about today. When I say interactive, I'm going to go through the presentation, as Kim mentioned, and take questions at the end. So feel free to, emoji high fives or whatever you want to do, comment in the chat, what have you, and we'll get to you at the end. So a little bit more about me. I am the Divisional Security Officer for Mastercard, which means I'm responsible for protecting one of our divisions here for full suite security. I'm also the Vice President of Security Engineering. So the TLDR about me is that I sit at the intersection of business, analytics, and security. That's me. As you know, I started out in business. I speak every business language. That really allowed me to be a champion for the business. And the way that I approach security is that we are enablers of the business. And I firmly believe that you cannot protect what you don't understand. You cannot build effective processes and capabilities if you don't understand what you're building it for. So I really take time and advocate for everybody to take time to understand the business, understand how security can add value to the business, and then, of course, underpin things with analytics, because it can be a great common denominator, conversation starter, baseline setter into decisions, into conversations, and really build that bridge, right? When you're starting to not just explore new concepts, but measure decisions, right? Figure out if things are working or not. Data can be quite powerful. And so I blend those three in my approaches to this stuff. Speaking of stuff, I've been at this for over several decades. If you've heard any of my talks, you will hear me date myself repeatedly. So that's the old accountant in me. I'll just come up with these ridiculous jokes that nobody gets. But I like that about me. So I've been in 8 industries and over 18 different organizations. I've been on a public board. I started a nonprofit, and I also just recently published a chapter in a book that came out called Fighting Fire with Fire. And that's a conglomeration of different security topics written by several different leaders in order to provide well-rounded perspectives on how to defend. I've been in a lot of different companies. You can probably recognize some of the brands there. I do want to clarify, I was never the director of the Secret Service. I was an advisor to the director of the Secret Service. So that's an important distinction. But as you can see, I've been an analyst, I've been a controller, I've been an auditor, I've been on the government side, I've been on the public side. So I've seen a lot of things. I tend to focus a lot on financial services. It's like The Godfather, they just keep pulling me back in. But I have the benefit of a wide breadth of perspective. And so that's really served me well in my career. And for anybody that's listening and thinking of maybe starting something different, my PSA there is that you could always try something different and it will only enrich you. So you can always reinvent yourself. I love security, so I've been doing this for a long time. So let's go ahead and get started. All right. Never neglect an opportunity for improvement. So what are we going to do? We're going to talk about where we are at the state of the SOC, areas of focus, and again, what we can do to try to improve some of the struggles that we have with our SOCs. And when I say our, I mean the collective industry. Here's why. One key point. The goal here is to discuss ideas. You may be on a journey where you're just building your SOC. You may be into a new role as the head of operations or the CISO, or maybe even an analyst. So this is designed to help you start, one, know that this is tough stuff and the struggles that you might be approaching are shared. Okay. So maybe we can think about things a little bit differently, and some of the ideas here might kickstart a way for you to tackle challenges in ways that you haven't before. So that's the goal of this, is just to give you some different strategies, because as you'll see, we've been doing the same things for a long time with the same results. That's the whole talk right there in a second. What am I talking about? Take a look back from 5 years ago. Now, SOCs started to really pop up after the major breaches in 2008. And of course, they were there before that, but that's when companies started to really, think about growing security operations, right, to protect against the breach. But even 5 years ago, you see that we started to build a lot of SOCs, right? There was, 60% of the organizations were planning on building an in-house SOC, or perhaps, deploying a hybrid SOC with some outside services as their core central security capability. And, that's based off a SANS Institute research. And I'm going to cite a lot of different research bodies here today, right? So we were building a lot in really unbalanced ways. And what I mean by that is that we had investment, we had dollars to spend. But I don't know about you, but I've seen a lot of SOCs designed with bells and whistles and monitors and really cool lighting without real efficacy there. So we put money to get monitors and chairs and tooling and and hopefully some headcount, although you'll see later that probably wasn't super adequate. And yet the SOCs were failing. The performance was failing. 85% of the organizations were not meeting their business goal, and almost a full quarter of those were not actually meeting minimum monitoring requirements. They were falling below, back then you're always going to get a maturity model, but in this study, a full quarter wasn't even reaching maturity level 1, which is like conceptual. Now, why is that? Because we rushed to fund, we rushed to build without really building the strategy behind it right up front, really defining our goals, figuring out what we want the SOC to do. And so we're saddled with this beautiful room with maybe not so many people in it, and it's not really serving us very well, right? So and to be truthful also, this 85% of not meeting organizational business goals, that had been a trend for several years. So even 5 years ago, we were struggling with this, and really we've been struggling for 10 years, and probably even since the inception. That number of 85 would vacillate between 72 and 82 and 85, but the directional point is that they weren't meeting our needs. So what about now? We are missing the mark on effective SOC design and implementation. And as you might be able to predict, if we fast forward to today, not much has changed. So the need is stronger than ever. 80% of respondents in several security studies say that the SOC is a central part. It's essential or at least highly important to maintaining your security posture, right? And that's intuitive. We don't need to spend a whole lot of time on that. But even in the last year with COVID spending, we saw security budgets increase, right? And we're spending a lot of money on SOCs. I mean, in-house SOCs are by some studies, a couple million, $2 or $3 million. Outside could be up to 4 or 5. depending on the size. And then, of course, as you're a larger organization, it could be much more than that, right? So even though we're getting funding and we're spending all this money, the efficacy is not there. The execution of it is not there. And that's for several reasons that we'll go into, but nearly half of the respondents were dissatisfied with the efficacy of their SOC for being able to detect and respond to attacks, for being able to just operate smoothly, right? To limit complexity, to show value. And, that was true both internally and external SOCs, right? So you saw previously that the majority, over 60%, wanted to build their own. Now we hear 5 years later, they get frustrated, they outsource, and then they're not happy with the outsource. And they said, okay, well, nearly 2/3 of those respondents said, well, I'm going to bring it back in-house and then or switch vendors because, perhaps part of it is that we don't know what the value should be, right? We don't have established goals. We haven't level set what it's supposed to look like, right? So if you don't have a good vision of that, then you're going to always be met with disappointment, right? And that's true with any capability we're going to build. The other thing that is paramount, always listed at the top of the problem chain here is, troubles with talent, hiring, retaining, engaging them, skilling them up, getting access to them. And then there's tech problems too, right? Over the past few years, we see this proliferation of tools and great capabilities, and it's easy to buy something and think that it's going to solve, right? That it's going to get a win. It's sexy tech, and we just put more stuff in the stack. And then what does that do? It creates a bunch of stuff that we might not be prepared to action. And that can, overload your SIM or SIEM, potato. You have an intelligence overload, you get alert fatigue, you can't action stuff. And these things lead to, this notion that what we're building isn't working. So why don't we start thinking of ways to try something different? Here we go. So basically what that boils down to is, if you've ever had a consultant in your space, you're gonna know, you knew this already, people, process, and technology, right? And the size of these circles here are on purpose, right? Because as I said, usually it's not adding more tech that's going to help, right? It's really focusing on process and people. And we'll talk about that in a minute, because those are required in order to get the tech to work. They're all interrelated. So let's talk about the tech. I'm not going to spend a super long time on this, but more doesn't mean better, right? You have to define the goals. If you're just starting out with a SOC, or maybe you're doing a reboot of your SOC processes, it will benefit you to start small, right? It'll benefit you to gain the capabilities to use the tech that you have really well, and make sure that you're pursuing tech that you have the ability to action, to understand, and to really implement so that it works. And so what do I mean by that? I was having a conversation the other day about SIEMs. And I'm going to keep saying SIEM. Okay. I was having a conversation with an industry colleague, and he said, so how do you feel about, the new fandango bells and whistles on the SIEMs? And I said, now, I'm part data scientist. And I would say, I think that the budget is really wasted a lot of times on these huge overloaded SIEMs, because we fail to realize that data science is in fact a science, and you need to have the capability to understand and normalize the data that's going in. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to put a whole bunch of alerts in a single pane of glass, treat them all evenly, right? And then not have the capacity on the human side to actually action them. So there is value in learning how to tune the tool to make sure the SIM can work well for you, right? It doesn't make sense to invest in something that has all of these features if we're not really honing the capabilities of the essential features. And so you might be able to start or reboot with something a little bit cheaper or a little bit less sexy and focus that time and effort on getting the right talent and the right skill sets in there. You need some data experts, right? Data scientists that can help you tune, that can help you understand the metrics, that can help you baseline things, that can help you interpret the variations alerts and how they're connected to each other, how the tools are connected to each other, what they're informing you of, what kind of threats. You'd be surprised how many folks assume that an alert from one tool is equal to an alert to another. Even in the same space, they can be wildly different. Even from the same vendor, the services can be very different on what they're interpreting. So that's going to affect the type of metrics that you pull out of your SOC. So, start small. If you're at a situation where you could start rebuilding, experiment, small experiments. Even if you're already in a situation where you've got a huge, capability, you've got a huge room, a huge tech, a huge all of this type of stuff. You can start the improvement process with small experiments. Take a data set, take a tool, make it work really, really well, and then grow the capability after that. But a lot of times folks just throw everything in and then expect the analyst to know what to do with it, right? So when we talk about doing something different, experiment with small use cases first, prove the model, and then expand. Okay. Let's talk about processes for performance. The TLDR on that, the process is worth it. Now, some of you are sitting there in the audience going, duh, thanks, Captain Obvious. But let me tell you something. Do you know that in some of these studies, it's revealing that 50% of organizations that are respondents to these studies, okay, right? So, the sample size makes a difference, all right? Really don't have robust playbooks. They don't have content knowledge management systems. A whole third doesn't have any processes written down at all. And those statistics are persisting throughout the years. So that tells us that we are not investing in the continued maintenance and improvement of the processes. We might spend, if we're lucky, we might spend some time up front designing. And we know that given what we just talked about, a lot of folks don't do that, don't take the time to really define the goals of the SIM. Of the SOC. Are we really focused on these particular critical assets, right? What is it that we want the SOC to achieve? That's part of that tech discussion, but it's also part of the process discussion, right? You're not going to be able to protect everything with just the staff that you have. You're going to have to bring in reinforcements. You're going to have to make decisions on, whether or not you're in-house or hybrid or whatever. You're going to have to prioritize at some point. And that's part of the definition of what you want the SOC to do, right? But the process piece is if you're moving fast, right, or you're trying to balance a lot of priorities and you don't build in the capacity to capture the processes, you're going to end up with siloed knowledge, with things that are stuck in folks' head, right? And heaven forbid that rock star might switch jobs or switch companies, and that knowledge is, going out the door with them. You're going to be in this constant cycle of reinventing the wheel as you see turnover in the staff, right? Instead of taking that time to iterate on process improvement, right? If you invest in a baseline of processes, right, so that they're easily repeatable, and then you hold some innovation challenges. It doesn't have to be this, once a year drudgery exercise. It can be part, if you approach it a certain way, it can be part of that ownership of those that are performing these duties every day to help improve that. But you have to create an environment where they are able to design those processes. Just mean they need to have capacity to do those special projects. And we'll talk about that as a strategy in a second too. The other thing I want to focus on when we're talking about process is the handoff. A lot of SOCs are shift work based, right? There are some that are, 8 hours a day, 9 hours a day, and that's great. That's going to serve a certain risk profile, but there's still a handoff with the outside party, right? On who's watching over that. There's still a handoff if you're doing at some point. And that handoff piece, if you've been in a SOC, that is the trickiest, touchiest time where knowledge gets dropped, packets get dropped, human packets, right? Because you'll start on investigation or what have you. And if you don't have that process down of how you do briefs and who's going to grab what and what you're going to focus on in that changeover, then you will also suffer, not just, failure of line of sight and longer times to respond, but you're going to spend that rework again. And that all bakes into the efficacy of the SOC. So if you focus on process and you take time out, you're going to see benefits in people, right? You're going to give them the ability to feel confident in what they're doing every day, right? So, and then also give them the ability to build on that and innovate on that. Your tech is going to work better because, frankly, your tech cannot work without processes defined, right? We want to automate everything, but the automation relies upon knowing the standard processes of what to do so that we can automate those things. And if we haven't investigated them and we know that there's a lot of organizations that haven't, thought about that piece, then, we can't take advantage of that benefit for efficacy, right? And efficiency. It's not just about, first you want it to work and then you want it to work really well, right? So there's not just with the tech, but with the different teams as well. Response times, playbooks, all kinds of things, right? And then, of course, the business will benefit from that too, right? That those defined processes will allow you to measure. It'll also support any contractual obligations or SLAs that you may have. See, when we design, just like any product development, we want to say, does the light turn on? Does Hello World print? Does the analyst have access to tools? Do they have a single pane of glass? But sometimes we forget to focus on tying that over to the business need, right? And the business need likely has SLAs or contractual obligations, right, on how we perform security. And many times SOC performance is and IR is in that. So if you take the time to develop your processes, you'll also provide a great benefit to the business by allowing them or supporting the enablement of those SLAs and contractual obligations, right? All right. So now we're wrapping up towards the end. The biggest topic is people, right? Always people. So here's an analogy. This is what we did to our first SOC analysts. We promised them this beautiful SOC, right? And spy-like capabilities, right? And the ones and zeros. I swear, stock images are hilarious. Although this is an actual SOC, the design is pretty interesting. Although I've seen SOC design where you have all of these monitors, and you got the big ones in back, and they're like tiny screens with 14-point font, which nobody can read. So that the physical design of the SOC is a whole other topic that happy to connect with anybody on, because there's definitely some weaknesses there. But we promised them, the SOC analyst goes in thinking like they're going to get the Pinterest version, and then what do they get? Right? This just pile of stuff that they're trying to find a needle in a haystack for. And what happens? Oh, disappointment sets in, right? And here's what happens. So the struggle currently with the talent is that, we talk about talent shortage, and I put an asterisk there because I think, there's not a shortage of folks that are willing to run to the problem, that want to get into security. Part of that shortage is defined by, or is enabled by, our inability to understand what it takes to succeed as a SOC analyst, right? What are the attributes that you would need from a person? You need persistence of thought. You need, analytics. You need maturity of thought. You need the focus to work through a problem, aside from the technical training, which almost is always given in when you're onboarding someone new, right? So here we see that 60% of respondents in this particular study with SANS, said that talent was a top struggle. And a corresponding Poneman study said that 90% of those respondents said that they lacked adequate security talent. And the competition for that is fierce. And to try to thwart that competition, we're paying more. Some of these studies show increases between 15 and 30% year over year in salaries. And we still can't keep people. So retention is short. Sometimes, the average is about 2 years in the SOC. You probably noticed this yourself, but a good chunk of that is less than a year, right? Because either people will switch companies, they'll quit. Sometimes they're just not cut out for the work. Capacity for the SOC is ill-planned. If we are talking about designing a 24/7 SOC, I can tell you that sometimes there's not a lot of math behind that decision that I've seen. And I've seen folks think that they could pull off a 24/7 capability with just 8 analysts total, right? That means that these folks are working weekends all the time, 12-hour shifts. Of course, that environment's going to be frustrating. You've got to be able to build, if you want a 24/7 SOC or a follow the 7 SOC, you have to think about how that's going to affect the people and do the math so that you have capacity for people to have lives outside of work, to have predictability in their schedules, to be able to supplement some of the monotony with different projects, with, rotations or what have you. And the other struggle, speaking of rotations, is that the career pathing beyond a SOC is really nebulous, and a lot of organizations don't think about that. And so it's no surprise that we're having trouble really addressing the talent issues. So what can we do here? Here's some ideas that I want to throw out to you. The first one is to expand the talent pools. And what do I mean by that? Most organizations will look at the SOC, look at level 1 SOC, and they want the undergrads that are coming out, right? The newly minted folks that are coming out of an undergrad program or whatever, to meet a certain salary band. But what I would challenge you to think about is that expand that pool to graduate degree programs, which is typically overlooked, and second career candidates. And I will say that given the increases because remember, most of the time they make that decision because they want to hit this salary price point. But the salary price point is still attractive to many previous, or second career candidates, right? That entry level SOC analyst salary is more than most industries pay. So you have the benefit of seasoned individuals that are looking to come into InfoSec that you may be overlooking because you think they might be too expensive or, too experienced. And here what I'm saying is that they bring with them the ability to think through problems that comes with, more life experience, to have the patience to work through tedious work many times, especially if they're coming from a like industry or what have you. And this, time and time again, when I look at the talent pools in graduate programs, they're struggling to break in because so many companies are only focused on the college grads, only focused on, the associate degrees, only focused on, this other population. But the richness that can be gained by expanding that with more seasoned workers is profound. I mean, think about the life of an analyst when you're doing shift work. Recent college grads, usually younger folks, they're not necessarily going to value the shift work life and the predictability that it will afford. They're going to be resentful if they're on call all the time. They're going to be resentful if it scope creeps. But if you're in a 24/7 SOC with 8-hour shifts, that could be really valuable to someone that has obligations outside of work. They could, maybe they have families to take care of, maybe they have children to take care of, and so they need that shift work. They're asking to be considered. And so if anything out of this presentation that it gets you to think about that talent pool, because the price point can still be there and you get the benefit of all of this other contextual experience that they can bring to the table, let alone the mentorship capabilities, let alone the leadership capabilities that you can see work through. The other thing I want to stress here is that if we know that there's a short tenure and that the work can be frustrating, design in rotations. Let them know up front that the expectation is to be in the SOC for a defined period of time. Don't assume that they're going to be there for years, right? If you want to move them up a level, you have to think about that as part of the hiring strategy. You're in the SOC for a year. Maybe you go into a team to gain additional context, choose your own adventure style, right? You go into an infrastructure team, which will help you. Maybe then you come back as a level 2 or a level 3 or what have you. Think about what type of needs your SOC might need in that area as far as talent development and work that in, right? Be really thoughtful about that and be upfront with those expectations, because it can be really hard to, for a new person coming in that just realizes that it's not what they thought it was going to be when they feel like there's no end in sight. But you can certainly, if you know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, that I'm going to have to do this for a year, I'm going to have to do this for 9 months or what have you, and then I get to do something different. Or in the meantime of that 9 months, maybe once a week, I rotate in with another team to learn context, which will then help bring more breadth of understanding to my ability to perform in the SOC. Then that's going to give you better engagement with your analysts, right? I talked about tweaking capacity and making sure that you're not just going bare bones on this, right? That depending if you're going to spend money, get it to a place where your team can actually function and have a life, right? That's going to pay more dividends than buying another tool. The other thing that I think is great are gamification techniques. As you move up in levels, you might have challenges to clear the board with alerts and earn badges when you do. That is reliant upon making sure that the data is normalized and you have the ability to perform metrics, but it can be a really powerful tool in bringing some excitement into the SOC and the work of the SOC, right? And again, building context with change of scenery is being really thoughtful about moving people through. And other areas of the business do this already. When they recruit people in, a lot of companies have these job rotational programs that you could, work with finance or work with strategy or what have you, and maybe mirror one of their programs, right? So that you're intentionally moving people through the security disciplines, which will not only give you a better practitioner, but it will also help in the retention piece. And then lastly, you want to make sure that you're igniting the passion for security, not just in the SOC, but through all of your teams. And that means bringing other voices in. That means encouraging them to engage with the security community. I can't tell you how many times I've taken a group of analysts or whomever to a B-sides or in a convention or a con that it doesn't have to be expensive, and I invest in that time with them, and you start seeing them connect ideas and get excited about what they're doing again, get them out of the monotony of their work and into an innovation space where new ideas are shared, and you'll see their ideas come out, and you can leverage that for all of those improvements that we talked about. Tuning your tools, tuning your processes, building some of these rotation pieces with folks, designing gamification techniques, but you got to give them the ability and the investment to do that, right? And so, we're out of time. And if you want some strategies on how to gain buy-in, there's definitely ROIs for all of these types of things. I'm happy to connect with anybody afterwards that has questions like that. But if I could leave you with this, is that for the tech, start small. Don't go for the sexy. Make sure that you're getting what you can out of the tech that you have. Getting your processes in line, that's required for everything, right? And then the people, look at other talent pools. We have a cyber talent initiative, for example, that bridges people from government into private. And I'd love to talk with anybody about that, where we, support and enable college graduates, graduate students, whomever, anybody in school to take a role with government for a couple years and then come into the hiring process with strategic partners like Mastercard or Microsoft. And, we pay off student loans once you hire in. There's all kinds of things that you could do there, right, in order to expand the talent pool for skilled workers. So with that, Kim, I went over a little bit, but do we have any questions or comments from the chat?
We do. We have, I'm waiting for the tech team to put it in, but I have a couple of comments. Crystal Day said, I always enjoy Anne-Marie's session. She empowers fellow women, #women in tech, which we all love. Terry said, great advice. It's so hard to find good talent right now, as everyone knows that. And then I have Joshua says, sorry, sorry, guys. My camera's having tech difficulties. There we go. Here I am. Sorry. It says, have you ever used an upskilling program to hire candidates? I'm part of an organization, Minnows Labs, that takes folks that are recent graduate veterans, boot camps,
yes,
etc., and upskill them to real life experiences. These resources are cost effective. Yeah, there are a lot of great companies out there that are doing that.
Absolutely. We do that with veterans. We do that with underrepresented communities of people, right? We do that, as I mentioned, the Cyber Talent Initiative is that public-private partnership that we have with government to help not just serve and protect our government, right? And get great minds in there and encourage them to go into government and be trained up with the wonderful resources that they have, and then come back into the commercial space, right? So yes, and I think that, there's such a benefit that organizations of any size can leverage those types of things. You have to be thoughtful about the training of it and what the goals are of it.
I'm out of St. Louis, where Mastercard is based, and your CISO, and I forgot his name. I know he does. Ron. Yes, he does a big community service with getting young women in tech. So, and then you have, I call her Dr. J. Do you know who I'm talking about? She's really awesome too. Yeah, she's really awesome too. She's been on the show before. So all of you guys from Mastercard, you guys do such a great, you guys do great work for, working with veterans, working with young people and mentoring people. So, kudos on everything that you guys are doing over at Mastercard.
Not just young people, second career people.
Exactly.
There's so many powerful minds out there that are being overlooked. So is there a talent shortage? Maybe, but there's really a focus problem of where to find the talent too, because they're out there.
We love Mastercard here in St. Louis. We've had a lot of big corporations leave us here. So we hope Mastercard is going to stick around for a while. So looks like they are. But anyway, well, Anne-Marie Zettlemoyer, thank you so much for being here. She's the BSO at Mastercard, and I imagine anyone can find you pretty easily on LinkedIn. Is there any other?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. All right. Well, thank you for spending this past hour with us. And if anyone else has any other questions, just you can reach out to her on LinkedIn. You can also go up to our network lounge, and that will message her. It won't provide you with her email, but it does send a message. I didn't want to freak you out there thinking your email's out there for hundreds of people, because I know you guys' inbox is pretty intense. So anyway, all right. Well, thanks, Anne-Marie.